You're welcome.
For our next presentation, we have my dearest friend, Mennatallah Hendawy. She is a PhD candidate at TU Berlin. Her master thesis was about connecting urban policy and policy making and implementation. The case study was of Maspero, Cairo. She was working as teaching assistant at Ain Shams University. She is interested in visualization in visible and invisible social spatial transformation. Her work focuses on intersection of cities, justice, and communication. Through her work, she aims to inspire and sustain and empower the development via communication towards social, spatial, and visual justice. So I'm very interested for your presentation and looking forward to it.
Thank you, Mukhtar, and thank you, everyone. I imagine that we are over the time by maybe more than 1 hour. I hope you find the presentation interesting. So my name is Mennatallah Hendawy. Can you see my screen now? Yes?
Yes, we can.
So my name is Mennatallah Hendawy. I'm currently a doctoral fellow at Max Weber Foundation, the Orient Institute Beirut in Lebanon. So I'm actually now presenting from Lebanon. And I'm also affiliated to Ain Shams University on a PhD study leave as a lecturer assistant, and I'm a PhD candidate at TU Berlin. What I'm going to present today is actually the first part of my PhD dissertation. I'm doing a cumulative dissertation, which means it's a series of publications. I have 5 papers. Today I'm going to present the first paper, which is on the academic city versus the everyday cities, or the ordinary cities, as I name it. Before I start, I would like to say, I'm not sure if the organizers have shared the paper with you. The paper is actually in press at a special issue by Professor Patsy Healy. If for anyone actually interested in planning education, it would be great to refer to her work. And I would like to thank as well all those who actually helped this research to come out. And today we listened to Yahya, who as well actually contributed a lot to the discussions of this research. I also would like to thank Dr. Hassan for inviting me to do the presentation. And yeah, thank you for listening. So what I'm going to present is, first, I'm going to speak about the MedPlan project, which is the background projects through which I do my PhD. And then I will speak more about my overall PhD scope and where this paper lies exactly. And then I'm going to speak about my graduation project, which is the trigger for the whole PhD and for this research specifically. And then I will speak about the conceptual framework and how I work in an interdisciplinary framework using theoretical frameworks from media and communication studies to study urban planning. And then I will speak about the research questions and methodology, and then my kind of original contribution to knowledge with what I call as the academic city and how I compare it to ordinary cities. And in the end, I will speak more about how media is used to make visible actually all the kind of cities are being presented in the previous presentations. For example, the presentation of Maher and Yahya. So to start with, this project is it's an externally funded project by Leibniz Gemeinschaft in Germany. It's a third-party funding body or organization. And we were a group of 6 core team members involving two urban planners, me and my supervisor, 2 media and communication studies scholars, and 2 history scholars. And we were working in an interdisciplinary project to look at the intersection between media and communication studies and urban planning and development. Yes, and we basically base our work on the theoretical framework, if you're interested, of Andreas Hepp on the mediatization theory. So my PhD scope, this figure actually pretty much sums the whole PhD in a way. So as I mentioned, I have 5 papers. My first paper is on planning education, which is the one I'm referring to. And in all the papers, I try to look at what kind of visible urban visions are there versus the invisible urban challenges. My focus is on Egypt, but actually currently I try to implement the methodologies and the theories that I learned in my thesis on other contexts. My second paper is on planning practice, and my third paper is on planning politics, and fourth paper is on the planning context itself. And the fifth paper is on the co-constructed, what I call as a co-constructed city, and which is the visions targeted by those excluded from the urban planning process. I can speak more later, maybe in the questions, if someone is interested about this whole kind of cities. But basically, I'm now speaking about my first paper. And yes, in each paper, I focus on a certain medium of communication that makes visible urban planning and urban development, or urban plans and urban projects. And today I focus on the planning curriculum in the planning education system. So how I came out to think about this framework for the research, it's actually my graduation project in 2012. It was a poster of 3 × 7 meters, which I see now as a very huge poster. It was actually just after the revolution, and we were asked to do to actually implement a kind of a new city construction. And in that sense, we used, as usual in academia, poster presentations to present our work. The picture is a bit blurry, but what's important from it is to see the amount of visualizations used in it. In fact, over time, especially after my master's degree, I reflected again, or critically reflected and rethought again about the project. And I thought that there are justice questions, justice-oriented questions that can be raised by looking at the project. So you can see that my PhD project is a kind of an interrogation for my own, that started by critically examining my own graduation project, and then I moved forward to other fields like practice politics and so on. So the conceptual framework of the paper is actually based on the work of Marshall McLuhan. He is a very well-known media theorist. If you're interested to know more, I'm adding here 2 links that can help you to understand more about his concept. He actually, his work was in the 1960s, and in that time it was really the very beginning of the introduction of internet, and at that time as well, it was a kind of a high rise for mass communication like TV. And he was developing more than one theory, actually. One of them is the medium is the message. It's a book, as you can see, it's called Medium is the Message, and this, yeah, it's an interesting story. It was actually wrong typed in the publication, and then he liked it and kept it. In this book, he's actually co-authoring with a graphic designer, and if you look at the book, actually, if someone is interested, I can share it with you. It includes text as well as graphical presentations. So very briefly, what he is trying to say that the medium of communication actually shapes the content of communication. So for example, that I'm presenting today via Zoom, my presentation will be different if I presented in via a phone call, or if I wrote about it as an email, and so on. So very briefly, if 2 persons communicated via a certain mode of communication, this mode of communication affects what they say or the content that's being transmitted through this communication. I used this as a conceptual framework for this paper because I was interested again on the way my poster in the graduation project resulted in affecting the kind of urban planning content that's being mediated or communicated about the project. So the 2 main research questions come from here. I wanted first to discover which kind of academic city is made visible for students of urban planning in Egypt. And by academic city, I mean the city that's made visible to urban planning students in academia. And I postulate a kind of, or I assume an assumption that there is a different academic city than the other cities, or I say that there are different and multiple realities that are being present in academia, practice, and so on to base my research. My second research question is building on McLuhan work is how does the use of media in the education of urban planning privilege certain imaging or imagination over others? So how does the use of media actually construct this academic city? The research methodology is a mixed method methodology. I start with primary data collected from analyzing education materials in one of the public, of the 3 public planning programs in Egypt. And then I do structured, semi-structured interviews with 10 professionals and with 10 professors and 4 professionals. And then I made use as well of media in my research through using, for example, a Facebook polls with students and graduates, and like several times. And then I also did 2 focus groups. One of them, actually, Yahya Shawkat was part of it. And I also did an online survey to ask graduates about how far they think the visualization of their project contributed to their grading. So which city is made visible to future urban planners in Egyptian universities? So what I try to do in this research is and in this part specifically, I must say that I'm not sure if Gihad is attending or not, but Gihad was one of those. She is currently a lecturer assistant in Ain Shams University, and she helped me a lot in doing this kind of mapping through discussing on it. Early on in the research. So what we did is that we tried to map the different courses provided in our case studies and to see the type of intervention areas of that are dealt with in each course. And by this mapping, you can see, for example, that which was mentioned by Maher's presentation and earlier by Professor Faisal as well, that basically all the courses target urban development. There is no courses targeting specifically rural areas. At the same time, you can see that almost 90% of the courses speak about formal urbanism. And at the same time, around maybe 80% of the courses target new construction and new cities. I will come back to this kind of dichotomy later when I look at the academic city versus the ordinary cities or the cities lived by in Egypt to compare these numbers. The second mapping that I try to do in the paper is to look at the types of courses in the analyzed planning school, in the case study we analyzed. And it was basically showing that 56% of the courses are intervention courses and very little courses are theoretical or management courses. We did actually this kind of mapping because it was important to see the kind of skills or knowledge that urban planners are equipped with before, like through their education and before entering practice. And I will reflect again on this later when we look at about the skills needed actually by urban planners to tackle the urban challenges in the Egyptian context. The third and last mapping that we did for the academic city is to see the kind of physical versus social participatory aspect tackled in each course again. And we tried to look at how, for example, in city planning course was the most course which had a social or participatory element. And by that we mean that there is a direct interaction between the students, for example, and beneficiaries of the project. So in our studied case study, it was shown that, for example, students are requested to go to the field and maybe to speak a little bit with people living in the area that they are working on in the planning studio. And that's why we put for it a kind of more social interaction. More details about how we view the different courses and the social aspect and physical aspect is actually present in the paper. So the objective of the previous 3 mapping was actually to try to look at which kind of academic city is present versus which kind of needed academic city is present, or in other words, which kind of ordinary cities are present and lived in the Egyptian context. You can see, for example, we mentioned that 100% of the projects are in urban areas, but statistics show that 42.2% of the Egyptians actually live in urban areas, and more actually living in rural areas. So this can raise some questions about the extent to which there is I will not say a gap between planning education and practice, because I think it is more a gap between planning education and reality. We can discuss this more if someone is interested, but this narrative of a gap, I am now actually rethinking about it. My second observation was that most projects, as I mentioned in lectures and planning curriculum, deal with formal areas, while 65% of areas in Egypt are listed as informal areas and 45% are formal. My third analysis was to look at the project that deal with new cities. And as you can see, and this is actually based on my work with Yahya Shawkat in 2015, he presented part of it in his presentation, that it's only 2% of the population actually go to informal areas. And also it's based on a reference by the World Bank in 2017. So this kind of dichotomies can actually raise a lot of questions about having a unique city in planning education versus the needs of the community. So how does the use of media in the education of urban planning privilege certain imaging, or actually privilege this kind of academic city that is made visible? So for those who took a look at the paper, you can see that I'm doing a kind of a mapping for all the courses and versus the type of media employed in each phase. I'm actually employing like the main two courses related to city planning, the urban city planning course and the housing design course. And I try to see the different media used. So for example, in the first phase in the city planning course, there is a team visit to the site. And the media employed in this sense, it's to take photos and to present them during like a tutorial time or a section time. And the proposal of this media employed is to document the process or the observations and the first impressions on the site, to present it and also to visualize it. I will not get into too much details, but there are two important points that I need to say regarding the kind of media used to communicate urban planning projects or urban design projects. The first one is I found this example, and thanks actually to the student who agreed to share it in my paper, that can show you how far there is a kind of a global branding strategy to locate the graduation project or her graduation project in that sense. So for example, by mentioning Hollywood, although maybe Hollywood might not be directly related to the context that she is speaking about. And at the same time, this kind of global popular culture narratives that I say it makes the poster presentations of graduation projects more like a cinematic presentation. The second interesting project that I was also like honored that the student accepted to be part of the paper, and she actually mentioned that in that project exactly she had to change in the real characteristics of the site by changing the water element size in order to make it look better in the poster. So this is the kind of narratives I'm trying to deal with by asking about which kind of medium is employed to communicate the academic city, and how this kind of medium actually affect the planning content itself. So accordingly, if undergraduate planners get exposed only to one exclusive academic city, how can they plan future diverse cities? And by that I mean, it's actually based a kind of on a postmodern perspective on reality, that there are diverse realities, there are multiple realities. And I think that in a way, to equip better planners, we need to have more of a diverse reality represented in academia, not to favor one reality over the other. The last mapping that I would like to show, it was part of a focus group we organized in September 2018. And we wanted to ask and to see the kind of necessary role of planners in the Egyptian education, in the Egyptian context, versus the necessary roles focused on in Egyptian universities. And for that, we tried to map the skills needed in practice versus the skills given in academia. And you can see that the skills needed in practice, of course, include some technical skills, communication skills, drawing skills, but also include skills related to critical thinking, analytical thinking, socio-spatial skills, and so on. But what is present in education, as shown from the discussion, that it's basically technical skills and visualization skills, but there is a lack and a need to focus as well on other social or communication skills that the role of urban planners, as many scholars speak about, need to be aware of, like negotiation skills, communication skills, like given the nature of the role of urban planner. So I will finish my presentation with this question. I will be happy to hear about your thoughts. Yes, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Minna. Thank you for the interesting presentation and the very valuable contribution. So I will open the discussion, and if there are any questions for Minna, so please raise your hand or write it on the chat. There is thanks from Nagla, as always.
Thank you, Minna, very much for this good presentation. Really useful to see these banners and the difference between them and how they have been elaborated.
You're welcome. Actually, in the paper, I refer as well to the quotes from the students. So they speak about their project, and it was interesting to see how when they speak about their project, they also refer to the media used to communicate. Good to see you, Noha.
Good to see you.
Yeah, but it's nice that when you add something like that, you have you take the quotes from the students themselves, like they are moving some of the real factors of the site because they wanted to look on the presentation or on the, so that's a thing with the education, like as you said, like between the gap between education and the reality, not the practice, because the reality you cannot do that. Even the practice itself, you cannot do that, but it's more like reality. You are in different, living in different world, I mean.
Actually, it's interesting that you brought this point, because I think we need to, like my point of view, that we need to go beyond the discussion on the gap between education and practice, and to see that there are 3 spheres of action for planning. Not only 3, actually, there are much more, but if we think about education, it will be first planning education. There is also planning practice, but also there is planning reality. And it's important from my point of view to differentiate between planning practice and planning reality, because I think that the education and practice are very well aligned with each other, but I'm not sure to what extent they are aligned with the reality needs. I'm not sure if this point is clear or not, because it's like it could be a little complicated. I totally understand. If it's not clear, you can ask me. Yes.
Confusion a little. If you wanna clarify more about it, you are more than welcome. Or
yes. So, for example, I need to give a simple example. So I think that, for example, the planning formal practice is actually focusing on what the academic city is focusing on. So most of the planning offices will be working on formal city, on new urban developments, in that sense. But if we look again and compare what actually, it will be interesting. This could be a research idea to map, like we map the academic city, to map what the projects are actually working on in comparison to the ordinary cities and what's needed. And I think we will see the same discrepancy as we saw in the academic city.
I totally agree with you. And yeah, if there are any question, I think we can